Chapter 5236. In reality, he blamed He Xiaomi a little. If she hadn't disappeared, he might not have lost and Su Corporation might have ended up in his hands. He Xiaomi couldn't see any of this. All she wanted to do was keep Su Qing tied up and keep her secret. However, as the two of them lived together, more and more conflicts arose. He Xiaomi used all sorts of methods to restrain Su Qing. Su Qing couldn't stand it and refused to return to where they lived. He grabbed her. He Xiaomi followed him wherever he went. She found out that Su Qing had gone to the small town where He Xiaomi went missing. It was a peaceful place. He Xiaomi didn't dare to go to that place. She was afraid of being recognized and the child would come looking for her. So she could only wait at home. Every time she was about to enter that place, she would panic. Once, she saw a few familiar faces at the entrance of the small town. She was so scared that she ran away as if she was avoiding the plague. She seemed to have understood something, but she immediately ignored it. Before she knew it, Tangguo was already 35 years old. She announced her retirement from the entertainment industry and returned to take over the family business. After the interview, Tangguo removed her halo and got into the car. Zhuo Yi, who was acting as the driver, said coldly, "Now that you're about to start your second career, have you thought about marriage? For example? Get married or something? Are there any benefits to marriage?" Zhuo Yi, "There are a lot of benefits. For example? There will always be someone to serve you tea and warm your bed. It's not like they can help me with my work. There are a lot of people who can serve me tea." Zhuo Yi gripped the steering wheel tightly. He was conflicted. In the end, he said, "As a husband, I have to work hard to complete every task my wife gives me. Work is not a problem." "That's fine." When Mr. and Mrs. Zhuo found out that Zhuo Yi was working with Tangguo in the company, they couldn't help but laugh. "Now you don't have to worry about your son. He has found a long-term boss," Zhuo Qingfei said with satisfaction. "Look, this is the result of doing a good deed. If nothing goes wrong, he won't be fired for the rest of his life." Ever since Tangkor was taken over by Tangguo and Zhuo Yi, it developed rapidly and even collaborated with Su Xin several times. A few years later, Su Qing looked at the rapidly developing Tangkor and guessed that the CEO of Tangkor was very similar to the owner of the mysterious email. Coupled with various speculations, he felt that Tangguo was very likely to be that person. But he did not say a word. He simply avoided every project that Tangkor was competing for. He was present at all the gatherings that Tangkor attended. He supported all the projects that Tangkor supported. Many people realized that Su Shi followed Tang Shi in everything. Because of Su Xin's persistence, he drank a lot of soup. Tangguo felt it and didn't avoid it. Su Xin was not a fool. He must have guessed something. In the end, there was a rumor circulating in the business circle that President Su had a crush on Boss Tang. Unfortunately, Boss Tang was already married, so she could only look on helplessly. Because of this, Zhuo Yi was jealous. "This is wonderful pen shop." He even looked for Su Xin twice to ask him why he kept staring at his wife at every cocktail party. Su Xin felt a little wronged. He really didn't mean that. He just felt that he had to be respectful when facing his teacher. Tangguo's attitude of not avoiding him and even bringing him to drink soup had already revealed her identity. "I only have respect for Boss Tang. I don't mean anything else." Zhuo Yi realized that this was indeed the case, but he was still unhappy. Su Qing stayed in the old town and had no intention of coming out. Father Su went to look for him a few times and quarreled a few times. In the end, he even stopped the family's support for him and told Su Xin to ignore him. This was because Su Qing did something that completely angered Father Su. He actually sold his shares to the Su Corporation's competitor. He Xiaomi couldn't enter the small town and couldn't get support from Su Qing. She returned to her old path and had to work to survive. Her current situation was often photographed by the media and written into news. She didn't dare to go to the small town. Every day she was worried that someone would come looking for her. So she lived in a more and more remote place. In the small and dark house, she regretted looking for Che Ruoqian. She wasn't Che Ruoqian's daughter. How could she be like this? Chapter 5237. Tangguo woke up this time and saw a patch of red in front of her. There were also some red candles that were burning. The candlelight was so red that it was slightly trembling. She instantly understood that she had transmigrated to her wedding night again. From the layout of this room, this world was not set in ancient times. Their family background was probably not bad, but they were definitely not from an official's family. "Young miss, how can you lift the veil? Be good and don't touch the red veil right now. This should be lifted by the son-in-law." Tangguo was lifting the red veil and looking around the room when she heard an urgent voice. She quickly looked over and saw a 13 or 14-year-old servant looking at her anxiously. Her hand was already on her veil and she quickly put it back on. Tangwa didn't lift the veil again because the little maidservant spoke again and handed her a piece of candied fruit. "Miss, if you are hungry you can eat this. You have to endure it for a while. After tonight, whatever you want to eat when you want to eat, Han will help you get it." Tangwa could clearly feel that this servant girl who called herself Han tone was a little strange. It was as if she was not a normal person. She took the candied fruit and put it in her mouth. It was a little sweet. The candied fruit that did not have any additives tasted very good. She did not touch it and decided to look at the memories first. She was in a bad mood about getting married as soon as she came over and having to get married a second time in the future. Even if it was just a little bit earlier, she would not have gotten married. She threw away all the distracting thoughts in her mind and began to look at the memories of this world. Sure enough, the moment she saw the memories, she realized that her feelings were not wrong. Han did not treat her as a normal person. She was currently in Wuxing County's official Tang's manor. Her identity was official Tang's only daughter and she was doted on by thousands. The only bad thing was that her intelligence was a little lacking. She was commonly known as a fool. However, she wasn't a fool who didn't know anything. Occasionally she would have a little bit of intelligence. She could clearly recognize the people close to her, like her own father. She would also have some short and simple conversations. Even so, in the eyes of outsiders she was still a fool. An idiot would always be an idiot. Outsiders wouldn't care how much of an idiot you were. Minister Tang and his wife loved each other very much. When they first got married they did love each other for some time. However, life was not perfect and there were regrets everywhere. When Mrs. Tang gave birth to the original owner, her body was damaged, and she only lived until the original owner was 3 years old. Mrs. Tang's only wish before she died was that Minister Tang would take good care of their only daughter. For more than 10 years, Minister Tang had always remembered his late wife's words and spoiled his only daughter like a little princess. Even if she had some flaws, she was still the apple of his eye. The case study said that in such a situation he should have another child, preferably a male, to support the family and take care of the original owner in the future. I'm catching up with my books. Unfortunately, Minister Tang loved his late wife too much and couldn't accept another woman. Whenever he thought of his deceased wife, his heart would be filled with guilt. That was why he had never taken a concubine for so many years. In ancient times this was a very rare thing. Could even be called a strange thing. His original plan was to adopt a child from a relative's family in the future and inherit all his family business while taking care of the original owner. Chapter 52:38. But he was afraid that if he adopted her early, the original owner would feel wronged. She would feel that he didn't want her and didn't love her. Thus he didn't make a decision. He planned to make a decision when he was about to die. He believed that as long as he gave away his family's property, the child who inherited his family's property would take good care of his beloved daughter for the rest of her life, whether it was out of morality or reputation. In this era, people cherished their reputation. He never thought that something like this would happen. If he knew, he wouldn't have hesitated to make a decision. The original owner's tragedy began with today's wedding. Mu Shanji, a mountain man who delivered firewood to Minister Tang's family. He was a few years older than the original owner. He was different from the other mountain men. He was tall and strong. If she didn't know that he was a woodcutter, she would think that he was a young master from some family. Because he delivered firewood to Minister Tang's family every day, the original owner often saw him. When Mu Shanji was 7 or 8 years old, he delivered firewood to Minister Tang's family. Thus they knew each other at that time. The original owner liked to see Mu Shanji and would even share her snacks with him. Minister Tang knew about this and didn't stop it. Because there weren't many people who could share snacks with the original owner. It was rare for his daughter to make a friend, so he was happy. Moreover, Mu Shanji looked good. Although he was a woodcutter, he knew when to advance and retreat. He knew etiquette. Others would more or less say that his daughter was a fool. Even if she called her Miss Guo, they would still say that she was a fool behind her back. Although the original owner was a fool, she didn't like to hear people call her a fool. She wasn't a complete fool. She could tell from the tone which people had good intentions and which ones had bad intentions. Not only did Mu Shanji not call her a fool, he would also talk to her patiently. There were even a few times when he helped her scold those who mocked her as a fool. This scene was deeply engraved in her mind. From then on, she treated Mu Shanji more specially. Whenever there was something good, she would give it to Mu Shanji. This Mu Shanji was different from ordinary people. If it was some snacks or food, he would generously accept it. If it was something slightly more expensive, he would give it to Minister Tang to show that he could not accept it. Perhaps Miss Guo did not understand and insisted on giving it to him. If he didn't want it, Miss Guo would make a fuss again, so he could only take it to Minister Tang. Therefore, Squire Tang appreciated him even more. He didn't want those things back. In his opinion, they were just some small trinkets. Squire Tang just kept them and didn't need to ask him about them in the future. Mu Shanji was a very principled person. Every time he came, he would report to Zhang Xian. He would only take the things away after Zhang Xian confirmed it. Actually, he really needed these gadgets. He wanted to read books. These days, books were very expensive. He needed a lot of money to get them. Also, his mother's body wasn't in good condition. She had to see a doctor often, get medicine, and eat some good food. With the gadgets given by the original owner, his life was greatly improved. Later, as the original owner grew up, she began to pay more attention to Mu Shanji. As long as he came, her eyes would be glued to him. Minister Tang was very helpless. At the same time, he also thought that Mu Shanji was a good candidate. His daughter had reached the age of marriage. Initially, he did not consider this aspect. After all, people's hearts were fickle, and he was afraid that his daughter would be at a disadvantage. Chapter 5239. However, Mu Shanji was different. This child was filial, knew when to advance and when to retreat. He was well-mannered and not greedy. His honesty made him like him very much. He wanted to recruit Mu Shanji as his son-in-law, but he didn't like to force people. So, he brought Mu Shanji to him and asked if he was willing to do it. If he was willing, as long as he treated his daughter well, he would be in charge of the family business after he passed away. However, he had to keep his promise and treat his daughter well. He was not a heartless person. He even promised that after Mu Shanji turned 40 years old, if the other party and his daughter did not have any children, he would allow Mu Shanji to leave a child for him. It could be said that Squire Tang's offer was very tempting and he didn't intend to force him into a dead end. However, because Squire Tang was so nice to outsiders, Mu Shanji couldn't find an excuse to refuse. Squire Tang also asked him to go back and think about it. He didn't want to be in a hurry to refuse because they were still young. After he thought about it carefully, he would answer the question. Squire Tang's offer was so tempting that even Mu Shanji couldn't refuse. He knew that as long as he agreed immediately, his fate would be changed immediately. He would no longer have to worry about not having enough money to buy medicine for his mother. He wouldn't have to worry about his mother's illness anymore. However, if he agreed, he would be tied to Tang Guo for the rest of his life and he would never be able to be with the person he liked. Yes, he already had someone in mind. The relationship between the two was just flirting with each other. Occasionally they would exchange letters and tokens. However, because of some things, they didn't get to the bottom of it. The reason why he didn't express his opinion to Squire Tang was that there was a difference in status between them. Not only that, but Squire Tang was already engaged and would get married when she was of age. If he said that, Squire Tang's impression of him would change immediately and he might not want his firewood in the future. There were so many families in Wuxin County, and Squire Tang paid him the most. Therefore, he really didn't dare to refuse with the excuse that he already had someone in mind. He was afraid that Squire Tang would ask him who his sweetheart was. He didn't know how to lie yet, so he only said that he would think about it. When they got home, Mu Shanji's mother saw that Mu Shanji was confused and distressed, so she asked him what was troubling him. Mu Shanji respected his mother very much, so he repeated Minister Tang's words. After Mrs. Mu heard this, she felt that Squire Tang's conditions were too good. He had considered all aspects. She persuaded Mu Shanji to agree. It was better than chopping firewood for the rest of his life. Besides, Tang Guo was not so stupid that she could not take care of herself. She was just a little slow. She knew how to recognize people close to her and she was good-looking. He heard that the reason why she was a little foolish was because she had been in her mother's womb for a long time. Her future children probably wouldn't inherit this trait. In the worst-case scenario, didn't Minister Tang say that he would be allowed to keep his bloodline if he didn't have a descendant by the age of 40? Mu Shanji's mother couldn't bear to see Mu Shanji spend his entire life as a mountain man chopping firewood for a living. In her eyes, Mu Shanji shouldn't have to suffer such things. He should be able to live a good life. It was a pity that Mu Shanji couldn't live the life he should have. Meeting Squire Tang, who appreciated him, might be an opportunity. However, Mu Shanji said that he already had someone in mind. He was afraid that he couldn't agree to this matter. Under Mrs. Mu's questioning, he said that his sweetheart was Tang Guo's cousin, Tang Jian. She was only 1 year younger than Tang Guo. Chapter 5240. Tang Jian was the daughter of Minister Tang's younger brother. Her father went missing many years ago when he went to the capital to transport goods. There was no news of him until now. There were rumors that he died in the hands of bandits. His wife heard the news and passed away soon after. When Tang Jian was 10 years old, she was brought to Minister Tang's house and lived there for 4 years. It was the year she came. Her poor and pitiful appearance was deeply engraved in Mu Shanji's mind and he could not erase it. Mother Mu tried to persuade Mu Shanji to give up the idea. Tang Jian was engaged since she was young. It was not something he could think of. She was going to get married in a year. Mu Shanji also knew this. He was very upset, but there was nothing he could do. Mother Mu thought that it was fine whether Mu Shanji agreed or not. Now she hoped that this matter could be settled so that Mu Shanji could forget Tang Jian as soon as possible, so that there would be no trouble in the future. However, before Mu Shanji could think about it, something happened at home. It was all because Mu Mu's mother had a conflict with the villagers. She had a weak body, so she fell and hurt her waist. Mu Shanji was furious when he came back. He picked up a stick and went to the family to beat them up. However, the family was not to be trifled with. They filed a complaint against Mu Shanji. Mother Mu fell on her own accord. Everyone in the village witnessed Mu Shanji beating the family, so it was a lawsuit with no chance of winning. What awaited Mu Shanji was jail time and a huge amount of compensation, unless the family was willing to negotiate and settle it privately. The villagers did not help them because they were outsiders and did not have a close relationship with the villagers. They would not allow outsiders to bully them. Mu Shanji's mother sold everything in the house that should be sold. She went to the family to plead for mercy. Unfortunately, most of the money that Mu Shanji received was used to buy books and medicine for her. The money that they collected was less than 10 taels. How could the family agree? They insisted that Mu Shanji go to jail. Mother Mu could not let Mu Shanji go to jail. In a hurry, she thought of Minister Tang, so she quickly ran to Minister Tang's house and asked him for help. Minister Tang heard the ins and outs of the matter and decided to help Mu Shanji. With his status, he went to negotiate and even sent a sum of money as compensation. That family didn't make things difficult for him and agreed to settle the matter privately. Mu Shanji was spared from prison because he owed Father Tang a huge favor. Later, Mother Mu persuaded him to agree to Minister Tang's request and marry the original owner of the body. He promised to take good care of her for the rest of his life. Then there was the wedding scene today. After the wedding, nothing happened between Mu Shanji and the original host. It was only because Mu Shanji bumped into Tang Jian on his way to the bridal chamber. Looking at her resentful eyes, he panicked and regretted his impulsive decision to agree to the marriage. Tang Jian had always been a strong woman. She rarely showed her weak side in front of others. However, on his wedding night, under the dim light, he could see that her eyes were red. She was probably crying secretly. On the way to the bridal chamber, whenever he thought of Tang Jian's appearance, his heart would ache. It was very painful, but it was too late for regrets. Even if he regretted it, it was impossible between them. Tang Jian was going to get married next year. There seemed to be an uncrossable river between them. After the wedding, Mu Shanji performed well and gradually gained Minister Tang's trust. Except for not consummating with the original host, everything seemed to be perfect. Chapter 52-41. Mu Shanji didn't want Minister Tang to think too much, so he pretended to consummate the marriage on the night of the wedding. After Minister Tang trusted him, he learned how to manage the family business from him. However, Tang Jian always appeared in his sight. Even if he tried to control himself, he would still look at her when no one was looking. It was the same for Tang Jian. They had feelings for each other, but they couldn't be together. It was undoubtedly torture for them. Tang Jian's father also left behind a lot of family business. When they were young, Minister Tang took care of it on behalf of him. Later, it was gradually handed over to her. Now Tang Jian took care of it herself. Therefore they met a lot. After a lot of contact, it was inevitable that they would have some private time. They even had some physical contact and crossed the line verbally. The relationship between the two of them went from avoiding each other to wishing that the sun would rise earlier every day so that they could meet each other. Later on, they would even create some private space, but their excuse was to discuss business. Occasionally they would bring the original owner to deceive others. The original owner was different from normal people. She wasn't smart enough and didn't know anything about men and women. How could she find out anything when she was deceived by two smart people? Mu Shanji and Tang Jian maintained this relationship until a year later, when Tang Jian got married. Although both of them didn't want this result, they couldn't go back on their words. Tang Jian still got married under Mu Shanji's agony. He had already stopped, but Tang Jian came back less than half a year after she got married. She came back as a husband with all her husband's property. Later he found out that her husband was in poor health. After she got married, he didn't even have the strength to consummate the marriage. He was also the only child. His parents died early and he only had an old lady. After his death, the old lady was gone and she was in charge. She wasn't familiar with that place, so she came back with all the property. It was inconvenient for her to live with her father, so she bought a house and lived in a more remote and quiet place. In order to see Mu Shanji, she often used the excuse of seeing Tangguo to come to the mansion. The flame that had been extinguished between the two of them gradually rose again. In the end, they couldn't control it and something that shouldn't have happened. Moreover, it couldn't be stopped. That kind of relationship continued. Only Mu Shanji's mother knew about the changes in Mu Shanji. At first she was shocked. She couldn't bear to see Mu Shan in pain. Later she helped him hide it and covered for him. She even went to Tang Jian's place in person. No one suspected anything. The original owner was a fool and everyone had deceived her. How could she know what was going on behind the scenes? Moreover, Mu Feiqi's mother had married the original Mu Qiqi in Mu Shanji and worked in the minister's mansion, so it was easy to hide it from Minister Tang. Mu Shanji had always been very careful. Even after Squire Tang's death, he still hadn't discovered this. Squire Tang's death was an accident. She didn't know where the trouble came from. That day outside the Mushan Mountains, a group of bandits rushed into her mansion and killed everyone they saw. Squire Tang heard the noise outside and knew that they might not be able to escape, so he asked Honor to take Tangguo and escape through the small door. There was a carriage at the small door. If they were lucky, they should be able to escape with their lives. The original Mu Qiqi was taken to the carriage in a daze. Honor urged the coachman to go quickly. But at the critical moment, the original Mu Qiqi thought of Mu Shanji. She didn't know why, but her mind seemed to be suddenly clear. She quickly asked the coachman to change the direction and go to find Mu Shanji. She was afraid that the bandits would catch up with them, so she asked Honor to take the coachman to find Mu Shanji. But Honor didn't want to and wanted to follow her, so the coachman drove the carriage. The original Mu Qiqi and Honor were killed by the bandits who chased after them. Mu Shanji escaped in time and survived. He took care of the affairs of the minister's mansion and sold his family property. In order to escape, he took Tang Jian and Mu Feiqi's mother far away. Later, he found the mystery of his identity and recovered his identity. He went through the difficulties hand in hand with Tang Jian. In the end, the two lovers got married. Chapter 52-42. The red candles in the room were crying. Mu Shanji, who was dealing with the guests outside, was already half drunk. He was being supported by the servants to the bridal chamber. When passing through the long corridor, the half-drunk Mu Shanji saw Tang Jian, who stopped to make way for him. At that moment, all his drunkenness disappeared. Tang Jian was standing there alone, but he couldn't stop in front of her. He could only pass by her with the help of the servants. He couldn't help but look at her. The light was dim, but he could see that Tang Jian was sad at this time. Her eyes were red. She must have just cried. Mu Shanji was full of regret. He regretted that he agreed to this marriage. Unfortunately, after the ceremony and the wine, he was going to the bridal chamber. At this time he was already the son-in-law of Minister Tang. It was impossible for him and Tang Jian to be together. No one noticed the moment when Tang Jian and Mu Shanji looked at each other with longing and reluctance. In the eyes of the servants. In the servants' eyes, Tang Jian made way for Mu Shanji as the groom. After all, they had to walk through the long corridor. Mu Shanji came to the bridal chamber with heartache. Looking at the room full of red candles and the burning red candles, there was no joy in his heart. Under the guidance of the servant girl, he finished all the necessary procedures. Only Tangguo and Mu Shanji were left in the room. Brother Shanji. Tangguo saw Mu Shanji in a daze. She called him according to the tone of the original owner. Her tone was a bit dull, but it was obvious that the owner of the voice should be very fond of this person. Mu Shanji was indeed awakened. He looked at Tangguo, who was sitting obediently by the bed. Seeing her clear eyes, he suddenly felt guilty. He only felt very confused, but he still forced a smile. He reached out and touched Tangguo's head. Then he pulled her to the table and pointed at the candied fruits on the table. Are you hungry? If you are hungry, eat something. You can rest after eating. I'm a little hungry. Tangguo didn't refuse. The original owner did this. She sat on the stool and ate something. She glanced at Mu Shanji, who was still in a dilemma. Then she saw Mu Shanji staring at the bed. He bit his finger and dripped a few drops of blood on it. Then he quickly spread out the quilt like a thief. Is it good? After finishing what he wanted to do, Mu Shanji came to Tangua's side and sat on another stool. More if you like. If it's not enough, I'll ask someone to get more. Tangua nodded gently. She thought to herself, Mu Shanji is really impolite. Does he think he's the owner of this place? He entertained her as if he was entertaining a guest. For the time being, she did not care too much about it. This body was indeed a little hungry, so she had to hurry up and eat something. When Tangua finished eating, Mu Shanji coaxed her to sleep. He covered each of them with a quilt. He whispered to Tangua, let's keep a secret, okay? Secret? Yes, a secret. Mu Shanji turned sideways and said seriously, it's a secret between us. I won't tell anyone, not even my father-in-law. Only you and I know. Yes, a secret that only you and I know. Mu Shanji repeated and then said, from now on we are husband and wife. We are the closest people in this world, so we have to keep this a secret. In the future, no matter who asks, even my father-in-law Han, you can't tell them what happened in the room. Chapter 52-43. Tangua blinked and pondered. She didn't seem to understand, but at the same time she seemed to understand. Finally she spat out 2 words, sure? Because the original owner was mentally handicapped, Minister Tang didn't ask anyone to teach her some of the necessary procedures. In Minister Tang's opinion, Mu Shanji was a good person. He had been good to Tangua since they were young. He was going to marry Tangua so he could teach her in this aspect. After all, the original owner wasn't a normal person. He was really afraid that if someone else taught her, it would scare her and leave a psychological shadow. Hearing Tangua's answer, Mu Shanji was relieved. Yeah, sure. It's sure to tell others so you can't tell anyone. In the future, if anyone asks about what happened in the room, don't tell them. You have to keep it a secret. A secret? Tangua pretended to remember this word and then nodded heavily. Keep it a secret. It's brother Shanji's secret. Mu Shanji was finally relieved. At this moment he felt a little guilty. He used Tangua's trust to make her do this. He dared to do it because he knew the original owner. She listened to him very much. She had been like this for a long time. As long as she listened to him, she wouldn't tell anyone about this matter. He already had Tang Jian in his heart. He really couldn't accept another person at the moment. Perhaps after a long time, his feelings for Tang Jian would slowly fade and he would start over with Tangua. Mu Shanji thought so and said, you're tired today. Go to sleep. I'll take you there tomorrow. Tangua closed her eyes and went to sleep. In fact, she entered the group to tell the story of this world to her friends. She didn't have time to care about Mu Shanji's entanglement. This person actually had someone in his heart. How could he have the nerve to agree to this matter? It was done, but he couldn't accept it. In the end, Mu Shanji couldn't resist the temptation. He was a bit of a bitch. Margaret, woo, I'm not in it again. I know that the creator of the world has never stopped targeting me. Shengguan Yungu, I feel like I'm also targeted by the heavenly Tao. Since I fell into that secret realm, one strange world followed another. It was simply endless. It wasn't easy to get out of a place where yin and yang were reversed, but in the end we still couldn't get out. Marguerite was no longer sad. Margaret, where are you? What strange things have happened this time? Shengguan Yungu, it's a place without light. It's dark everywhere. All humans live underground. As for what exactly was going on, he would have to investigate it later. He had just arrived, so he had not figured it out yet. Margaret, what an unlucky child. Do you want me to say a few words of blessing to you? Shengguan Yungu, Senior Margaret knows how to give blessings? Will it become a curse's curse? He was worried. Margaret, no wonder she to say the words to say. After confirming that everyone in the group was fine, Tangua chatted with them. After watching them play for a while, she left and went to sleep, to the TTT, as to the end. TT to be 8. 2, T to say to him to be a, T to have a. Normal to halves. S. She. Since things had come to this, there was no other way. He could only continue down this path. Mu Shanji couldn't sleep for the whole night. Every time he closed his eyes, he would think of Tang Jian, whom he saw in the corridor. When he finally fell asleep, he would dream of Tang Jian crying sadly in his arms. Chapter 52-44. Tangua had a good night's sleep. When she woke up, she saw that Mu Shanji had dark circles under his eyes. Obviously he didn't sleep well. She shouted to the outside, "Haner, Haner." Haner quickly came in with some maids with water. She helped Tangua dress and some maids helped Mu Shanji dress. Mu Shanji was still a little uncomfortable, but because he didn't sleep well, he was not in good spirits. So he asked the maids to help him. If it was in normal times he would definitely refuse. He did it himself and he really didn't have the energy to fight for this. Hanae helped Tangwa dress, wash up and then dress up. She whispered in her ear, "Miss, did you rest well last night? Are you tired?" She had seen the old maid tidying up the bed just now, so she asked. Tangwa looked at herself in the mirror. She was very satisfied with her appearance. After a while, she answered Hanae word by word, "It's a secret." Hanae was stunned. "A secret?" She asked in a low voice about last night's situation. Unexpectedly, Tangwa answered, "I can't tell you." Hanae understood immediately. She nodded with a smile and didn't ask more. It seemed that Miss was not bullied. So, other things were not important. She dressed Tangwa. Next, Tangwa and Mu Shanji went to see Minister Tang. In the hall, Mu Shanji saw Tang Jian. Tang Jian stood quietly aside. She looked well behaved. She only glanced at Mu Shanji and then lowered her head slightly, as if it had nothing to do with her. Mu Shanji also glanced at her hurriedly and quickly looked away. He continued the process of the second day of the wedding, bowing to his father-in-law and toasting. After the process was over, the whole family sat together for breakfast. There were 4 people at the table: Minister Tang, Tangwa, Mu Shanji, and Tang Jian. Tangwa was the happiest person at this meal. Seeing that she was fine and looked good, Minister Tang stroked his beard with satisfaction. Or eat more if you like. My appetite this morning is better than before." Tangwa looked up and nodded at Minister Tang with a big smile. She glanced at the table and picked up some food for Minister Tang. Squire Tang laughed happily and immediately ate the money that Tangwa gave him with a smile. Even if his daughter was a little mentally handicapped, she knew how to call him daddy and doted on him. That was enough. This huge family business was enough for his daughter to live a happy life. Tangwa didn't forget about Mu Shanji either. After all, she had to maintain her character and act as a silly girl who only cared about Mu Shanji. She picked up some food for Mu Shanji. Mu Shanji suddenly felt a great pressure. He saw Tang Jian looking at him with a smile. He saw Tang Jian trembling slightly and pursing her lips. He only felt that the food in his bowl was a hot potato. He knew that if he ate it, he would hurt Tang Jian's heart. But at this moment he had no choice but to eat. Tangwa saw Mu Shanji eat it and give him more money. She saw that Tang Jian was uncomfortable and almost couldn't maintain her character. She directly rolled her eyes. She found that Mu Shanji was eating with difficulty and maintaining a smile on his face. He looked happy, but in fact, his hands were clenched into fists under the table and were trembling slightly. If he liked her so much, why did he agree to marry her? These people she really didn't understand. They were so greedy and wanted everything. Tangwa kept picking up food for Mu Shanji in the morning. He ate until he was full. Chapter 52-45. It was good food, but because Tang Jian was watching, he couldn't taste it at all. Minister Tang ate more happily. Tangwa also put food in his bowl several times, which were all his favorites. Mu Shanji knew it was dangerous for him to go down, so he decided to see Tang Jian less. Tang Jian was going to get married a year later. It was impossible for them to be together, so it was better for everyone to see each other less. After breakfast he took Tangwa out to play. When Tangwa was done playing he went back to his room to read. Minister Tang was indeed a good person. Seeing that Mu Shanji liked to read so much, he asked the servants to clean up a room for Mu Shanji's study. He also asked the servants to copy many books and put them in the room. In this way, except for meals, Mu Shanji basically didn't see Tang Jian. His mind was filled with books, so he didn't think about it for the time being. Finally he felt less sad. Tang Jian was also avoiding meeting Mu Shanji. Now that she had taken over her father's business, she had to go out every day to look after the shops and check the accounts. She was so busy that she didn't even have time to eat in the mansion. The only one who was more comfortable was Tangwa. Mu Shanji had nothing to do with her, so she didn't have to do anything. She ate and drank all day, and asked the system to monitor the mansion to understand the situation. Other than that, there was nothing else to do. Mu Shanji's mother had been arranged to work in the mansion. At this time, she had become close with some servants. Because of her identity, the servants in the mansion were very obedient to her. She had observed Mu Shanji's mother's means. She was indeed not an ordinary person. She was very skilled in managing people and she definitely had seen a lot of things. She was very calm when she saw those gold, silver, and jade in front of her, and there was no greed in her eyes. Mu Shanji's mother fled to Wuxing County with Mu Shanji. The massacre of the Tang family was also implicated by this mother and son pair. There were still some years before that incident, so there was no need to rush. She needed to let Minister Tang know in advance that Mu Shanji was not as good as he thought. She was a fool now, so she could only use a fool's way to let her father know. It would be troublesome to become smart all of a sudden. It would easily arouse suspicion and jealousy. The people here were not fools. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Mu Shanji's performance made Minister Tang very satisfied. One day, after playing with Tanguo for a while, he was about to go to the study to read when he was stopped by Minister Tang's men. After he went there, he realized that Minister Tang wanted him to learn from him. "Father-in-law, the family business in my hands will be handed over to you and Guo sooner or later. Guo can't do these things. I also hope that she can live a carefree life. You can only worry about these things." This time Mu Shanji did not refuse. He still preferred to be busy. Whenever he was free, Tanguo would pester him to play. If it wasn't flying a kite, it would be playing hide and seek. It was really boring for a normal person to do these things with a fool every day. Therefore, Mu Shanji spent most of his time learning how to manage the family business from Squire Tang. The original owner was actually very easy to coax. As long as he patiently said a few words to her, she would be very obedient and play with the maids by herself. She would not cause trouble for anyone. Mu Shanji coaxed Tanguo in this way. Tanguo agreed obediently according to the original owner's temperament. While learning from Minister Tang, Mu Shanji and Tang Jian spent more time together. The seedling that had sprouted could not be extinguished. Chapter 52-46. Mu Shanji was indeed very smart. Under Squire Tang's guidance, he could draw inferences about other things. Squire Tang felt that he had picked up a treasure, so he trained him even more and gave him more power. After 2 months of learning, Mu Shanji handled some things by himself. Squire Tang didn't follow him anymore. Tanguo didn't interfere with anything for the time being. If she didn't give the two a chance to cheat, how could she get hold of them? If her father knew that there was something going on between them, everything would be nipped in the bud. How boring would that be? By then, with her father's love for his daughter, he would most likely kick Mu Shanji out of the house. Then, it would have nothing to do with them. When Tang Jian became a widow, they would have a chance to be together openly. And now that Mu Shanji had learned so much, he might be able to start a new life after being kicked out. Even if she didn't have the capital, Tang Jian did. Who could say anything about that? Even if her father felt uncomfortable, he wouldn't pursue the past for the sake of Tang Jian's father. Tanguo looked at Squire Tang and handed more things to Mu Shanji. In just half a year he didn't care much about things. He just didn't check the account book for 3 months. He was retired and spent more time at home playing with Tanguo. "Father, the kite is flying so high." Tanguo was flying a kite with Squire Tang. She couldn't help it. The original owner loved flying kites. When her father was free, he would fly a kite with her every day. He even made all kinds of kites himself. Not only that, he would take her to the street to buy small things every day. System. Host, I feel that you are being forced to open your business. Tanguo, what do you want to say? I want to say that you still have to endure. Endure until Tang Jian gets married and becomes a widow. Then the two of them will hook up. That's the end. Tanguo, if you didn't mention this, I would have forgotten. Give me the information of Tang Jian's fiancé. Although it's ancient times and there's no internet, according to the information we have, you should be able to cover that area, right? System, that's not a problem, but it will take a long time. It's okay, I'm not in a hurry. You just need to see what kind of illness he has and how he is. If he's not a scourge, I'll do a good deed and save his life. Tanguo sat at the side eating snacks. Seeing her father flying a kite for her, a smile unknowingly overflowed. But living a long life isn't necessarily a good thing. He has to wear a green hat. System. Dear host, have you forgotten that you are wearing a hat of this color? Tanguo. System. Dear host, I'll go investigate that matter first. As soon as the system finished speaking, it slipped away. He also felt that he was floating, so he quickly slipped away when the host wasn't paying attention. He didn't want her to come back to her senses and say that she was his number again. This was the pain of his birth. After the system slipped away, Tanguo continued to fly the kite. Since her father liked to play, she would let him play. He would take good care of his body so that he would not be angered in the future. Counselor Tang was especially satisfied recently. He felt that this was the happiest moment in his life. It was a pity that his late wife couldn't see all of this. However, he didn't know that at this moment, Mu Shanji and Tang Jian were sitting in a private room of a tea house, talking. The two looked at each other with eyes full of affection. After a moment of silence, Mu Shanji spoke first. Don't be too tired. You look like you've lost a lot of weight. Chapter 5247. Tang Jian could still pretend to be strong. Even if she met Mu Shanji every day, as long as he didn't speak, she could pretend that she didn't know anything and try to forget that feeling. Unexpectedly, the boss left early today, and they had a chance to be alone. Mu Shanji took the initiative to talk to her, and asked her to take care of herself. This sentence instantly broke all of her strength. Endless grievances rose in her heart, and her eyes became red, containing the tears that she tried hard not to let fall. Seeing this, Mu Shanji's heart also tightened. He couldn't be indifferent to Tang Jian's appearance. In the end, he helped her wipe her tears. I'm sorry. Mu Shanji said softly, it's just that we're not meant to be together. Everything hasn't happened yet. Why can't we change our fate? Tang Jian said angrily. If Mu Shanji had the courage, she would have broken off the engagement. Even if she was scolded by her uncle and looked down upon by the world, as long as Mu Shanji dared, she dared. However, Mu Shanji had never shown that. He always revealed that there was an insurmountable gap between them. They were meant to be together but not meant to be together. She hated to hear such words the most. She felt inexplicably wronged. The more Tang Jian thought about it, the more she couldn't help but wipe her tears. Mu Shanji panicked and hurriedly wiped her tears. What's wrong? Have you encountered any difficulties recently? Tell me. If I can help you, I'll definitely do so. Tang Jian looked at him with tears in her eyes, feeling even more wronged. She was sad here, but he didn't know what was going on. This person had never thought that there might be a future between them. At this point, there was really no chance between them. There was no need for her to say so much to him. I'll go first. Tang Jian wiped her tears and pretended that sand had gotten into her eyes. She left Mu Shanji behind her. Mu Shanji wanted to chase after her, but Tang Jian had already walked out of the door. He was afraid that if he got too close, he would be seen by others, so he watched her leave. Tang Jian felt it and looked back at him with a sad smile. Mu Shanji's heart tightened, and he really wanted to chase after her. For the next few days, Mu Shanji met Tang Jian. Tang Jian didn't say a word to him except for the necessary words. Her attitude was cold and indifferent, which made him very uncomfortable. Mu Shanji couldn't accept this, so he took the initiative to create an opportunity to be alone with Tang Jian again. Tang Jian wanted to leave, but this time he quickly stopped her. Tang Jian struggled and tried to leave. Mu Shanji pulled her back and hugged her tightly. She couldn't get away. What's wrong with you? Why have you been ignoring me for the past few days? Mu Shanji did not like Tang Jian when she was like this. He was also afraid that she would treat him like a stranger. Tang Jian sneered, How do you want me to pay attention to you? You are now my cousin-in-law. How do you want me to pay attention to you? Mu Shanji opened his mouth, but he couldn't refute. Mu Shanji, let me go. Since you know that there's no future between us, why are you blocking my way? In half a year I will be getting married. If someone sees us like this, it won't be as simple as gossip. Your reputation and mine will be ruined. Mu Shanji didn't let her go this time. He said firmly, I've already made arrangements. No one will find out. The top. Chapter 5248. You've been ignoring me recently. You're even more indifferent than when we first met. I feel very uneasy if I don't figure out what's going on. Jian, what's wrong with you? Why don't you tell me what's going on? Tang Jian didn't struggle anymore. Her voice was still sarcastic. She looked at Mu Shanji and said, So what if I tell you? Will our relationship change? Mu Shanji, it was the best chance for us to change everything, but you never thought about it. How can I not be sad? Since Mu Shanji said so, Tang Jian couldn't hold it in anymore. At that time you were still Mu Shanji, not the son-in-law of the Tang family. I was only engaged but not married. If you told me that you're willing to be with me, can't we be together? At most, our reputation will be damaged, but we can still be together. But you didn't think about it at all. You gave up on our relationship and chose my silly sister Tang. You obviously didn't have any feelings for her, but you still accepted my uncle's proposal to marry her and become the son-in-law of the Tang family. It's fine if you act like this, but I can clearly see your feelings for me from your eyes. Look at me, I'm full of regret and reluctance. What? You've already made your choice. Why did you show me such an expression to disturb my mood? You know that I can't turn a blind eye to these things. I'll be moved and hope will be born. But if we really do something, what will happen between us? Tang Jian's words made Mu Shanji speechless. He really regretted it. But what Tang Jian said, even if it was reversed, he still felt that it was a little inappropriate. If they couldn't get one, their reputation would be ruined. There would be no place for them in Wuxing County in the future. His mother would also be implicated. He regretted that he couldn't be with Tang Jian. Only then did he realize that his heart was filled with her. He could only apologize. Tang Jian pushed him away this time and he didn't stop her. However, in the future he secretly treated Tang Jian well. He trained his confidant, who was a servant he bought by accident, to help him do some trivial things. He had arranged for this confidant to take care of Tang Jian's affairs. Despite her stubbornness, Tang Jian accepted Mu Shanji's kindness and her attitude gradually softened. Tang Gua often received the system telling her about the two's behavior. At this time the two did not do anything excessive. At most they looked at each other affectionately. Occasionally when Tang Gua was sad, Mu Shanji would wipe her tears. System. Dear host, the information on Tang Jian's fiancé has been investigated. Do you want to see it now? This person wasn't a bad person. Rather, he was a little unlucky. His illness was from his mother's womb. This kind of illness, let alone in the ancient world, even in the modern world, if not properly recuperated, it would be fatal. As for his character, there's no problem. This person doesn't usually go out. It's just that his body is too weak, so it's even less likely for him to do evil. He's a relatively simple person. Got it? In that case, I'll find an opportunity to save his life. However, his existence cannot prevent those two from rekindling their old flame. Tang Gua was eating snacks. Squire Tang had been asking people to study these things when he was free. Vertex. Chapter 52-49. In the evening, Mu Shanji came back. As usual, Tang Gua followed the original owner's character and waited for him at the gate. Her eyesight was very good. She saw with her own eyes that after Mu Shanji saw her, his smile disappeared, and his expression became serious, as if something big had happened. Because he had mended his relationship with Tang Jian these days, he really didn't want to deal with Tang Gua anymore. Grab and seize. He found that as long as he looked serious, dignified and busy, Tang Gua wouldn't disturb him, as if she knew he had something important to do. In order not to deal with Tang Gua, he often showed this expression in front of Tang Gua. Tang Gua imitated the appearance of the original owner so well that no one could see the disdain in her heart. As time went by, Mu Shanji became more and more perfunctory. This person purely took advantage of the original owner's kindness to achieve his own purpose. He was willing to get married, but now he didn't want to deal with her. He probably thought she was annoying in his heart. Brother Shanji, are you hungry? Tang Gua's expression was still the same as before. No one could tell that there was something wrong with her. Her tone was sweet. Mu Shanji looked tired and nodded to Tang Gua. Delicious food. Tang Gua said and trotted in, happily leading the way for him. Mu Shanji also followed in. At first, he felt guilty when he did this once or twice, but he gradually got used to it. He secretly swore in his heart that although he couldn't give Tang Gua love, he would definitely make her carefree for the rest of her life. He would win the literature prize. Thinking of this, the guilt in his heart lessened even more. He felt that as long as Tang Gua's life was smooth and safe, he would complete the task he promised Minister Tang. Mu Shanji kept hinting to himself and imagining. At this time he didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, he felt that sometimes Tang Gua was a little annoying. Tang Gua felt it, but she was an idiot with a mental defect now. She shouldn't feel it, so she had to pretend nothing happened. At the dining table, she kept putting food on Mu Shanji's plate. Her face was full of smiles, as if she never knew how to be sad. This made Mu Shanji feel a wave of irritation. Because Minister Tang was also there, he ate all the food in the bowl. The corners of Tang Gua's mouth curled up as she continued to fill Mu Shanji's bowl with food. Soon his bowl was full again. Since she knew that he was feeling uncomfortable, she would try her best to make him feel uncomfortable as well. This person was really strange and changed very quickly. After all, he was still a heartless person. When the original owner was in danger, she suddenly became sober. The first thing she thought of was to tell him to escape. As for him, he managed to escape with his life. Later on, after he regained his identity, he gave up on avenging the dozens of people of the Tang clan for various reasons. Mu Shanji was an ungrateful wretch. It was just that he didn't show it on his face. Brother Shanji, eat. Tang Gua not only put food in his bowl, but also said something to attract his and Minister Tang's attention. Minister Tang was happy to see this, but Mu Shanji didn't dare to show his emotions. He had to pretend to eat happily, but in fact he was very uncomfortable. He still felt that Tang Gua was a little annoying. Chapter 5250. When the two returned to the room, there was no one else in the room. Mu Shanji was finally relieved. Brother Shanji. Tangwa looked at Mu Shanji with a smile. Mu Shanji was very annoyed by her ignorant look. He couldn't help but think of Tang Jian, who was very sensible at a very young age. He couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Even though Tangwa was a fool, she was pampered since she was young. But Jian was different. Her mother also died early. Her father was always busy and seldom at home. She was very lonely at a young age. When she was older, her father had an accident. She didn't even see his body. She had to live under someone else's roof. Now she had to take care of all the businesses by herself. It was simply life forcing Jian to go. Her sensible look really made people feel sorry for her. Jian was so good. Why was her fate so tragic? Brother Shanji, are you listening? Tangwa found that Mu Shanji was in a daze. She didn't know what he was thinking, so she pushed him. Mu Shanji came back to his senses. He pretended to be very tired and rubbed his forehead. What's the matter, Guer? Can we fly a kite tomorrow? Before they got married, Mu Shanji often flew kites with the original host. It was not that he wanted to play with the original host. At that time, the original host played with Tang Jian. Mu Shanji had an ulterior motive. After getting married, Mu Shanji seemed to have lost this function. He didn't want to fly a kite with Tangwa. I'm afraid not. Isn't it enough to have father-in-law with Guer? Of course, Mu Shanji didn't want to go. If Jian heard about it, she would be sad again. There are a lot of things to do during the day tomorrow. It's all father-in-law's orders. If I fly a kite with you, I can't do anything. Otherwise, father-in-law will be unhappy and think that I'm useless. Let the maid and father-in-law accompany you tomorrow, okay? When I come back, I'll bring you the best shortbread. The original host liked to play and eat. Mu Shanji's words had indeed attracted her attention. She hurriedly agreed. Tangwa was too lazy to deal with him. She just went through the process of setting up her character every day. After that, she washed up and went to bed with the help of the maidservants. Mu Shanji didn't dare to sleep in another room. He just lay on the side with his clothes on. It was really difficult for him. Late at night, Tangwa saw that Mu Shanji had fallen asleep. She opened the window and the cold wind blew in. She pulled the quilt tightly and fell asleep comfortably, letting Mu Shanji be blown by the cold wind. Sure enough, when she woke up early in the morning, she saw that Mu Shanji's face was not very good. Dear host, there is actually a high risk of death for ancient people who catch a cold. He has the life of a cockroach. Don't worry, he definitely won't die. System. Actually, he deserves it. He's always doing things to disgust Madam Host, so he got a cold. He deserves it. Mu Shanji had been coughing since the morning. Not long after he went out, his head started to heat up. He had no choice but to go back and ask the doctor to take a look. Everyone in the mansion was busy. Tangwa pretended to be very worried. After a while, she saw Tang Jian come in. Tang Jian asked her, Sister Gua, I heard that cousin's husband caught a cold. Are you okay? Tangwa didn't answer immediately. After all, she was a fool. She didn't even need to answer some questions. She only needed to stare at the other person in confusion. Naturally, Han would answer for her. Miss Tang is fine. It's just that the husband is seriously ill. The doctor said that he needs to rest in bed. We don't know when the fever will go away. The peak. Chapter 5251. Because Mu Shanji had a cold and fever, he was worried that his illness would spread to Tangwa, so he was arranged to recuperate in another room. Tangwa was happy to do so. At this time, Mu Shanji had already fainted. If he knew, he would be very happy. Tang Jian was actually very anxious, but she couldn't go to see Mu Shanji's situation. She could only stay with Tangwa and talk to her about some incoherent things. She was very anxious when she saw that Tangwa didn't go to see Mu Shanji. Originally, she thought that if Tangwa went to see Mu Shanji, she could also go and see the situation. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to achieve her goal. But she didn't want to give up, so she took the initiative to ask. Sister Gua, how is my cousin-in-law now? Aren't you going to stay by his side? Tang Jian asked politely. Even Han didn't realize that something was wrong. Not to mention other things, in terms of shrewdness, there were few people of the same age who could compare with Tang Jian. If it was too complicated, the original owner couldn't understand. She could only look at the other person in confusion and ask Han for help. Every time this happened, Han was responsible for answering these questions. The minister is worried that Miss is sick, so he asked you to visit him after he recovers. There are people watching him, so he will be fine. Han replied. She thought that Tang Jian was just asking casually. Tang Jian was helpless. She said calmly, I didn't think of this at the moment. Sister Gui usually pays too much attention to my cousin-in-law. I forgot about this. Then I won't stay any longer. I have a lot of things to do today. She couldn't wait here, so she could only leave. As soon as she went out, Tang Jian asked someone to inquire about Mu Shanji's situation. She was relieved when she learned that Mu Shanji's mother was also waiting by his side. Then she called her confidant and asked him to find a way to get close to Mu Shanji. She couldn't be at ease if she didn't know the news about him. Unfortunately, this was the minister's mansion. She couldn't see him even if she wanted to. She was afraid that people would gossip if they knew. Mu Shanji had a fever for 2 days. His whole body was in a daze from the fever. Finally, he survived. The doctor also felt that it was strange. Logically speaking, it was so serious that he might not be able to survive. In the end, he blamed it on Mu's strong body. Young master, the doctor said that you might not make it. You really scared me to death. Mu Shanji stopped. How many days have I been sick? Young master, you've been feverish for 2 days and you've lost consciousness due to the fever. Speaking of this, the servant looked around the room. At this moment, there were only him and Mu Shanji in the room. He took 2 steps forward and said in a low voice, Miss Tang is very worried about you. She has sent people to ask about you several times. In the past 2 days you've lost a lot of weight. Because of this you've lost a lot of appetite. Mu Shanji's heart ached when he heard that. Did you tell her that I woke up? Everyone in the residence knows about it. Young master, don't worry. Miss Tang even asked someone to send you some soup. She made it herself. The manservant Gui Lu hurriedly opened the food box beside him. I told the others that this was bought from outside. Young master really missed it, so no one doubted it. Young master, please drink as much as you want. Mu Shanji held the bowl and was satisfied with Gui Li's cleverness. I will reward you later. Mu Shanji drank the chicken soup, and the image of Tang Jian appeared in his mind. When he was almost done, Tang Gui came with Han Er. Han Er was carrying a food box in her hand. Brother Shanji. Tang Gui pretended to be very happy and urged Han Er to take out the porridge that nourished the stomach. Father said to eat this. Mu Shanji was full from the chicken soup and he didn't like porridge. He said, I don't have an appetite now. He rubbed his eyebrows. Gui Lu was very smart and quickly said, Miss Han Er, young master just woke up for a while and ate some soup that was bought outside. You should be tired now. Put down the porridge first and wait for young master to wake up before eating. Mu Shanji followed Gui Li's words and lay down. Han Er felt that Tang Gui was a little disappointed and comforted her. Miss, it's young master's body that hasn't recovered yet. He doesn't have any extra energy. He needs to rest and sleep more to recover. Oh. After Han Er comforted Tang Gui followed and left. She looked back and finally looked at Gui Li's face. Feed it to brother Shanji. Gui Lu hurriedly agreed. But after Tang Gui and Han Er left, Mu Shanji said, Gui Lu, you can eat that or throw it away. I'm already full. It's good that I haven't eaten yet. Gui Lu took the porridge and ate it. He didn't expect it to be so salty. Digression. Mobile version website. Chapter 52-52. Gui Lu, what's wrong? Mu Shanji asked when he saw Gui Lu spit out the soup. He was still immersed in the sweetness of the soup that Tang Jian made for him and didn't notice that Gui Lu muttered, so salty. Gui Lu said with a bitter face, Young master, the soup is so salty. Salty? Mu Shanji was puzzled. Did the chef put too much salt? If you can't finish it, throw it away. Do it secretly and don't let anyone see. Mu Shanji suddenly felt that this kind of careful life was not as free as chopping firewood in the mountains. Although he couldn't make much money in the past, at least he was free. He could go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted. If he didn't like to eat something, he wouldn't eat it. If he wanted to throw away something, he wasn't afraid of being found out. But now it was different. Since he lived in the mansion, he became careful. He was afraid that he would make his father-in-law angry. Mu Shanji looked at Gui Li's bitter face and felt a little relieved. It was much better than before. Buying Gui Lu should be the right thing to do. However, it was obviously not enough to only have Gui Lu as his confidant. He had to train a few more useful people so that he wouldn't have to be sneaky when pouring soup. Gui Lu told Mu Shanji that he was going to throw away the soup. When he looked at the soup, his face was full of disgust. Ever since he had been with Mu Shanji, he had gained Mu Shanji's trust. He had never eaten anything so disgusting. Not long after, Gui Lu returned to the room and whispered to Mu Shanji, Young master, when I went to return the food box, I heard from that the soup was made by the young miss. No wonder it was so salty. The young miss has never done any rough work. And that, it's not strange. Honor is too much. Young master has just recovered and she let the young miss mess around. The reason why Guelu dared to say this was because he knew that Mu Shanji didn't like Tangua. He didn't know the cause and effect of the mansion. Because Minister Tang was strict, the servants didn't dare to talk about Mu Shanji marrying into the family. They were giving him face. It could be said that many people in the Wuxing County were envious of Mu Shanji's good fortune. Guelu took it for granted that Mu Shanji must have his own difficulties to marry into the family. Otherwise he should have married the person he liked, his cousin. I see. Mu Shanji understood. Guelu is father-in-law's only daughter. If she wants to do something, how can a maid like stop her? Mu Shanji was not touched by Tangua's soup. He only felt annoyed. Fortunately he was full and did not try it. Otherwise he would be the one to taste the salty soup. Then in the future when young miss sends soup over, I will help young master deal with it. Guelu said, after this young master will have to rest for a while. Just now, I heard from that young miss has been very interested in this area recently. She might even send him a few more times. Mu Shanji nodded casually, sure, give me the book. Mu Shanji did not know that his every move was being monitored by the system. Originally, Tangua asked the system to monitor this because she wanted to see Mu Shanji suffer. She didn't expect Tang Jian to care so much about him and let him eat until he was full. Hearing the conversation between Guelu and him, Tangua didn't know what to say at this time. She really couldn't tell what kind of person this person was. Tomorrow I will watch him drink. System, host, good job. Chapter 52-53. In the afternoon, Tangua went to see Mu Shanji again. She couldn't say what she wanted to say in a hurry, at least on the surface. But had been by her side since she was young. On the way here, Tangua said some words to her intermittently. Already understood what Tangua wanted to ask Mu Shanji. So, when she saw Tangua staring at her, immediately said, young master, what Miss means is, do you like today's soup? Earlier, I saw Guelu go to return the food box, and the soup inside was finished. Young master, you should like it, right? In order to make this soup, Miss woke up early in the morning and pestered the cook to teach her. It took her a few hours and Miss was so tired that she was sweating profusely. Mu Shanji wanted to complain in his heart. After all, she had a precious body. She usually lived like a princess, and it took her so much effort to make a pot of salty soup that was inedible. But he did show a slight smile on his face. I like it very much. Thank you, Gua. He couldn't say that the soup wasn't good and he didn't drink it at all, right? Tangua saw Mu Shanji putting on an act and couldn't help but think that this person was very hypocritical. If it wasn't good, he could just say it directly. Her father wouldn't do anything if he knew. Her father was really not harsh. Ever since Mu Shanji came to the minister's mansion, her father had always been considerate of his self-esteem. He was so good to him, mostly because he wanted his daughter to live a good life, and hoped that Mu Shanji would not forget his original intention. Another part was because Mu Shanji was more outstanding and he wanted to nurture him. But this Mu Shanji really didn't remember his kindness. Mu Shanji saw Tangua's happy smile and felt that he didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, he only needed to say a few beautiful words to coax her. He won't drink the soup. Tangua knew what he was thinking. She said, Brother Shanji, there's more tomorrow? Mu Shanji's smile froze for a moment, then he smiled and said, don't work too hard. Leave these things to the servants. I don't want you to be tired. I'm not tired, Tangua emphasized. She really didn't do anything. She was the one who directed the whole process and the cook was operating. In the end, when the cook wasn't paying attention, she sprinkled a handful of salt in. She used the salt stored in the system space. In ancient times, salt was very precious. If a large amount of it suddenly disappeared, it would cause problems. Mu Shanji didn't want to deal with Tangua, so he pretended to be tired. Guelu was smart and quickly found an excuse. After Hanner explained, Tangua agreed to leave. In fact, she didn't like dealing with Mu Shanji. Now, she had to go through the process to pave the way for the future. That night, when they were having dinner, Squire Tang knew that Tangua had made soup for Mu Shanji and praised her for her ability. Squire Tang went to see Mu Shanji and told him, Guer said that she will make soup for you tomorrow. You don't have to refuse. It's rare for her to do something like this. If she likes to do it, just let her do it. She hopes that you can get better soon. If you don't get well, she will be sad. The reason why Squire Tang valued Mu Shanji so much was because of his daughter, Tangua. Mu Shanji could only agree. He felt a little helpless. The next day Tangwa made soup again. Of course the cook was still doing it. She secretly added a handful of salt and then brought the soup to see Mu Shanji. She planned to watch him drink it. Chapter 52-54. Thank you for your hard work, Gua. You've been busy all morning. You should go and rest first. Mu Shanji looked at the steaming soup and was terrified. He didn't dare to try this soup. Guilu just told him that Jian would send him soup later. He could just eat what Jian made. Guilu took the soup enthusiastically and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Miss and Miss Han. The young master hasn't recovered yet. You should go and rest first. Otherwise, the residual illness will spread to your bodies. That would be bad. I'll take care of the young master." Logically speaking, Tangwa and Han should leave after Guilu said that. However, Tangwa knew what Mu Shanji was planning and decided to watch him eat. Other than the soup, there were other side dishes. She didn't do anything to the side dishes and she didn't order them to be made. Brother Shanji, drink the soup. Mu Shanji's expression twisted for a moment. He wanted to say something but Han understood what Tangwa meant and said, "Miss probably wants to watch the young master eat. Recently, the young master is sick and Miss is very unhappy." Han was actually a little confused. She felt that Miss was becoming more and more difficult to understand. This might be why Miss was different from ordinary people. When she was in the room she wasn't sad. However, when she came out she wasn't happy. Maybe this was what others said about being touched by the scenery? Miss would only be sad when she saw someone and someone mentioned this matter. If she didn't see anyone and no one mentioned it, Miss's head couldn't hold so many things. Naturally she wouldn't be sad. If possible, she hoped that Miss would forget about this matter and be happy every day. However, Miss liked the young master so much. She probably couldn't. She only hoped that the young master would get better soon. Mu Shanji was stared at by Han and Tangwa. He couldn't get off the tiger. Guilu was scratching his ears and cheeks. He didn't expect that Tangwa wanted to watch the young master drink soup today. He was just a servant. What he said before was still within his duty. It wasn't appropriate for him to interrupt now. If Minister Tang knew, he would definitely be taken to teach him the rules. At that time he wouldn't be able to help the young master. Mu Shanji wanted to refuse but he didn't know how to. He was regretting it now. Why did he praise Tangwa's soup yesterday? Now the whole mansion knew about it. If he said that it didn't taste good, who knows what the servants in this residence would say about him behind his back. What was worse was that Tangwa was already scooping soup. She sat by the bed with a bowl and spoon and handed the spoon to his lips. "Eat." Honor hurriedly said, "Son-in-law, just eat. If Miss doesn't feed you she won't be satisfied." When Miss was sick when she was young, the squire also fed Miss like this. These things left a deep impression on her. I remember that the official was also sick. Miss fed him food but he didn't eat. Miss cried and was angry with him. She ignored him for a few days. In fact, Han was reminding him out of kindness. She was afraid that Tangwa would be angry later, and the whole mansion wouldn't be able to appease him. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would have a bad impact on Mu Shanji. In the end, there were many people in the mansion. It was inevitable that one or two people would say something unpleasant. Mu Shanji had indeed thought of this. He opened his mouth with difficulty and drank the soup in the spoon. As soon as the soup entered his mouth, he wanted to spit it out. However, when he saw Tangwa's serious and expectant expression, he swallowed it with tears in his eyes. His eyes fell on the side dishes. Chapter 52-55. Guilu wanted to give water to Mu Shanji, but he didn't dare to. He could only pick up some food for Mu Shanji. Mu Shanji's mouth finally felt better after eating normal food. Tangwa pretended not to know and continued to feed Mu Shanji soup. Grabbing and grabbing. She didn't stop until she had fed him half a bowl. Only those who had eaten this kind of food could understand how Mu Shanji felt at this time. Seeing Tangwa leave, he could finally vomit. Guilu hurriedly went to get water for him. After rinsing his mouth several times, Mu Shanji felt much better. At this time, he had a feeling that he didn't want to eat salt again in his life. Guilu, deal with these dishes. Mu Shanji said with difficulty. Guilu understood Mu Shanji's pain very well. He hurriedly took all the side dishes and soup to deal with. Fortunately, this was a small courtyard specially for Mu Shanji to recuperate. Next door was his study, so it was convenient for him to do these things without being discovered. In fact, Mu Shanji was hungry. He was looking forward to the food sent by Tang Jian. Because of the soup, he didn't want to eat the side dishes brought by Tangwa before. Tangwa was well aware of it. She didn't want to argue with him for the time being, but Mu Shanji couldn't eat the food cooked by Tang Jian for lunch today. She was now in Tang Jian's courtyard. She happened to see Tang Jian cooking and waiting by the stove with a covetous look. Tang Jian saw her like that and knew something was wrong. But she couldn't say anything. Her hand holding the spatula was trembling. Miss must be craving the food cooked by Miss Tang. Miss was busy the whole morning and only sent the food to Master and fed him soup. She didn't even have time to eat 2 mouthfuls. From the beginning, Minister Tang gave Tang Jian a quiet courtyard. She was in charge of this courtyard. Although it was not very big, it had everything she needed. These 2 days she had been cooking secretly. When it was time to eat, she would go out to eat. She didn't expect that Tangwa would come. She guessed that Tangwa must have come to ask her to eat. She couldn't think of any other reason. As expected, Honor explained, Miss just thought of Miss Tang, so she came over. She probably wants to have a meal with Miss Tang. It's almost time. I didn't expect Miss Tang to open fire here. Are you not coming over for dinner today? Actually, Han was asking on behalf of Tangwa. She was a mentally challenged person, so she didn't react quickly and spoke intermittently. It was impossible to get a clear answer. League of Legends YXL. Tang Jian was smart and had already thought of an excuse. She said, it's just that I haven't done this in a long time, so I want to give it a try. Counting the time, there's only about half a year left before I get married. At this point, she believed that Han would not ask any more questions and should understand her meaning. As expected, Honor's face was filled with realization. So it's like this. Then will Miss Tang be coming over for dinner today? Since Miss Tang is just trying to make it, there doesn't seem to be much here. There's only enough for one person. Since Miss Tang is hungry, why don't you bring the food over? If doesn't mind, of course there is no problem. I'm just trying to make it. I'm just afraid that it won't taste good, Tang Jian said, but she was a little upset in her heart. She really didn't expect that Tangwa would come to her place. Miss Tang's cooking looks pretty good. Just now at the door, Miss Tang was attracted by the smell, Han explained. She saw Tangwa walk towards another boiler, her eyes staring at a small soup pot. She followed and smelled the fragrance in the soup pot. Before she could ask, Tang Jian said, since I'm cooking, I also made soup. I don't know how it tastes. Chapter 52-56. Of course Han was praising her, but Tang Jian didn't appreciate it. She thought that she wouldn't be able to send the food over today. But when she remembered what Han said earlier, that Tangwa had sent food to Mu Shanji and even fed him soup, she felt wronged. Wasn't it because someone had served him well? He didn't need a meal like hers. Thinking of this, Tang Jian straightforwardly ordered the servants to bring the soup and dishes over. In this regard, Tangwa was very satisfied. Tang Jian's cooking was indeed good, even better than the chefs in the residence. She decided to call Tang Jian to eat every day. Grab and grab. On the other side, Mu Shanji waited and waited, but in the end no one came. The hot soup and delicious dishes were waiting for him, but Gui Li's bitter face was the only thing that came. He saw that Gui Li's hands were empty and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Did someone find out? If you meet someone, just tell them that you bought snacks from outside. Can't you do that?" "Young master, it's not like that. Something happened to the young miss today." "What happened to her?" Mu Shanji was anxious and couldn't care less about his hungry stomach. Gui Li quickly explained the situation. Mu Shanji was relieved. "So that's the case. Then go out and buy some pastries." "Yes, young master." Gui Li said and couldn't help but complain, the young miss really knows how to make trouble. She made the young master unable to eat properly. What will we do if we are starving? It was also because the system didn't keep an eye on them. After all, Mu Shanji wasn't a dangerous person. At most, he was a little disgusting. As a system, he didn't want to keep listening to what a disgusting person was doing. It would pollute his very pure system. Mu Shanji didn't blame Gui Lu, which meant that he agreed. If it wasn't for Tangwa, he wouldn't even be able to eat. In the past, when they didn't live together, he didn't realize that the fool was so difficult to serve. Sometimes she was really annoying and easily made people lose their patience. Mu Shanji gradually forgot his original intention and neglected the kindness. He went from swearing that he would take care of Tangwa for the rest of his life to thinking that the fool was really annoying. The guilt in his heart was gradually disappearing. Because he felt that the fool had ruined his plans, he thought that she was not good. The more he looked at her, the more he disliked her. Furthermore, marrying into her family still made him feel a little embarrassed. No matter how good Squire Tang was to him, He was still afraid of being judged by the servants. Except for Guilu, he didn't dare to order the others around. Especially after his recent illness, he was eager to cultivate his own confidence so that it would be easier for him to do things in the future and he wouldn't have to be afraid of anything. For the next few days, Tangwa continued to deliver soup to Mu Shanji. She would only leave after watching him drink a few mouthfuls. After she left the room, she went to Tang Jian's place and dragged her to lunch. In the beginning, Tang Jian would cook for Mu Shanji secretly. Later, when she saw that Tangwa went there every day, she simply stopped cooking. In the end, Mu Shanji had no choice but to eat the side dishes that Tangwa had given him. Fortunately, there was not too much salt in the side dishes. At least, it was enough to fill his stomach. He originally wanted to rest for a few more days, but now he didn't dare to get sick again. He recovered in 2 days and finally didn't suffer anymore. After his body recovered, Tangwa watched Mu Shanji leave the mansion. It was as if she saw a pig out of the cage. He was in such a good mood that even his footsteps were lighter. Now that Mu Shanji had recovered, she returned to normal. For the time being, she didn't care about Tang Jian's fiancé. She wasn't in a hurry. It wouldn't be too late to wait for Tang Jian to marry him. Tangwa supported her chin and counted the days until Tang Jian's wedding. About half a year later, Tang Jian was about to get married. The Xie family had already sent the betrothal gifts to the mansion. Everyone in the mansion was jubilant. Only Tang Jian and Mu Shanji weren't happy. Looking at the red flowers, both of them felt very sad. Chapter 52-57. Tang Jian had to prepare for her marriage, so she couldn't be busy with the business. These things were temporarily handed over to her subordinates to take care of. Therefore, she had fewer opportunities to get along with Mu Shanji in private. As long as she was in the mansion, they couldn't be alone. Since she was preparing for her marriage, she hadn't taken the initiative to see Mu Shanji. The betrothal gift from the Xie family finally pulled her out of a dream. Mu Shanji was now her cousin-in-law, and she was about to marry someone else. The Xie family was located in Qingfeng County, which was not far from Wuxin County. The two were neighbors. If they rode fast, they could arrive there in 4 hours. Miss Guilu has been secretly coming to ask me these days. He said that your cousin-in-law has something to say. He came again today. Should I send him back? Tang Jian's thoughts were interrupted by her personal maid, Qin Yang. Qin Yang was her confidant and knew all her thoughts. She also felt very regretful. It was obvious that her miss and her husband were the ones who loved each other. Why did fate tease people like this? At first, she thought that her miss could break off the engagement and be together with her cousin-in-law. But because her cousin-in-law changed too quickly and her miss was a little angry, the two missed each other. Besides, her cousin-in-law was also a good person. It was a pity to be with a fool. Her cousin-in-law was quite talented. Now that he had become the son-in-law of the mansion, he was dragged down by the mansion and had no chance to take the imperial examinations. If the two could be together, her cousin-in-law might be able to study in peace and prepare to take the imperial examinations. Her miss could concentrate on managing the business. They were a good match. Miss Gua not only couldn't help her cousin-in-law, but also was a burden. She made people unhappy everywhere. Could a fool be understanding and get along with others? Anyway, Qin Yang felt that it was a loss for Mu Shanji to marry into the Tang family. Ask Guilu if he has anything to say. I'm about to get married. It's not appropriate to see him again. Tang Jian supported her chin with her palm. Her beautiful face was full of sadness and sadness. It was a dream. I almost believed it. Ask Guilu to pass a message to him. Just say that it's time to wake up from the dream. What can we do if we don't see each other? From now on, he'll be a good son-in-law and I'll be someone else's wife. If we continue to be entangled, it won't be good for either of us. Tang Jian's smile was bleak. I'm afraid that he wouldn't dare to elope with me. What's the use of seeing me? Even if we meet, we won't be able to change the outcome. This was the reason why Tang Jian didn't want to see Mu Shanji. It was impossible between them. Mu Shanji obviously liked her and could be good to her, but he just didn't want to be with her. She had been dreaming for more than half a year and almost thought that it would come true. So what if Mu Shanji liked her? He was already bound by the minister's mansion, and she was about to be bound. She really wanted to ask him what he could say to her at this time. Could it be that he could change everything if he said it? If he really had the courage, a long time ago, he wouldn't have agreed to marry into the minister's manor. He would have confessed his feelings for her, and things wouldn't have come to this point. After listening to Guili's narration, Mu Shanji was dejected. Guili comforted him. Young master, don't be too sad. There was no room for redemption. Guela didn't know how to persuade him. Chapter 52-58. In fact, he was really partial to Miss Tang. Miss Tang was gentle and capable, generous and moving. When she stood with the young master, they were a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, fate played tricks on people. The young master became the family Tang's son-in-law. It was impossible for him to be with Miss Tang. He often heard some stories about the tragedy of lovers who couldn't be together. At this time he saw a tragedy with his own eyes. Mu Shanji sighed, "You go first. I'll be alone. What about the thing I asked you to do before?" "I found 2 people. They are still under observation. If there is no big problem, it should be fine." Mu Shanji couldn't look for people blatantly, so he asked Guelu to help him. He found a few useful people and trained them to be his confidants. It was much more convenient for him to do things. Mu Shanji also wanted to see Tang Jian a few days later. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a chance. He knew in advance that Tanguo was going to see Tang Jian. He pretended to accompany Tanguo. Then he sat in Tang Jian's reception room openly. However, he couldn't go in. When Qin Yang served him tea, Mu Shanji asked in a low voice, "I haven't seen Jian these days. How is she?" "Master Tang, Miss Tang is fine. She is not very happy." Before Mu Shanji asked anything, Qin Yang trotted to find Tang Jian. At this time, Tanguo was looking at the betrothal gifts in one of Tang Jian's rooms. She heard that Tang Jian was going to be a bride. As a fool, she was curious and came to have a look. Mainly because she found that Mu Shanji didn't have a chance to see Tang Jian recently. She reluctantly helped to let them see each other and deepen the impression that they were reluctant to part. If they could stand it, they would not do anything in the future. If they couldn't stand it, then it was their fate. When Qin Yang came in, Tanguo was looking at the beautiful jewelry. It was shiny and very pleasing. Qin Yang didn't take Tanguo seriously. In her opinion, Tanguo was a fool who didn't know anything. Some questions had to be explained many times before the other party could understand. However, Han-er was standing beside Tanguo, so she had to be more careful. She walked to Tang Jian's side and whispered in her ear that Mu Shanji had come. Tang Jian's expression froze for a moment. Her heart, which had been like a pool of stagnant water, started beating rapidly again. She smiled bitterly. In the end, she couldn't let go of that person. If the other party did not come, she could still avoid it. Since the other party was here, she really wanted to meet him. She gave Qin Yang a look and said, "I'm not feeling well. Qin Yang, you stay here and accompany cousin. If cousin likes anything, feel free to pick it. I want to rest for a while." After speaking to Qin Yang, she reminded Qin Yang, you have to take good care of cousin. Since Miss Tang isn't feeling well, then quickly go rest. Do you want a doctor to take your pulse?" Han-er asked with concern. Tang Jian shook her head. "No need. I'll be fine after some rest. It's probably because I didn't rest well last night. I'm a little dizzy. I'll be fine after some sleep." Han-er was just being polite. Tang Jian didn't look like there was a big problem, so she didn't ask more. Her main task was to serve her miss well. She didn't need to ask about other things. Tanguo's back was facing Tang Jian. Listening to the other party's brisk footsteps, she could feel that she was a little anxious. Tang Jian went to see Mu Shanji. "Tongzi, help me keep an eye on the 2 of them. See where they're going." Chapter 52-59. There was a bamboo forest behind Tang Jian's small courtyard. She went to the bamboo forest. Qin Yang was not the only maid she trusted. There was another one called Hong Yang who had been serving her since she was a child. She bought the maid herself so she could trust her completely. With Hong Yang guarding the door, she could meet Mu Shanji in the small bamboo forest. When the 2 met again, the distance between them seemed to have increased a lot. Mu Shanji really hated this feeling. He regretted agreeing to marry Squire Tang in Tanguo. Giving up a relationship was very different from what he had imagined. Not only could he not give up, but his mind was also full of Tang Jian. Thinking that she was about to get married, he seemed to go crazy. He looked at Tang Jian with bloodshot eyes and the first thing he said was, "Why don't you want to see me?" Tang Jian looked away and said softly, "So what if I see you? Can it change everything? I said a long time ago that we have missed the best chance. Now you are my cousin-in-law and I am about to get married." Mu Shanji was speechless. Yes, there was no ending between them. With his status, he was not even qualified to ask her not to get married. Jian. Tang Jian couldn't hold back her tears. Mu Shanji quickly wiped her tears, and then hugged her tightly. Tang Jian suddenly laughed, which made him very confused. I thought you didn't have the courage to do such a thing. With this hug I can get married in peace. Tang Jian did not push Mu Shanji away. At this time she just wanted to hug him. When they left here they would never be together. At this time Hong Yang ran over quickly and interrupted the two's loving scene. She said anxiously, Miss Guerra is here. The two quickly let go. Tang Jian asked in a panic, why is she here? After asking, she knew that it was not the time to discuss this. She quickly looked around and planned to let Mu Shanji hide. There was only one way out. Tangwa did not know these things, but she had Hong Yang by her side. She could not be deceived. It was very unreasonable for Mu Shanji to appear here. Although it was a small bamboo forest, it was not connected to a mountain. It was surrounded by walls and there was no back door. The small bamboo forest was so small that Tang Jian did not know where to hide. What should I do? What should I do? Tang Jian looked at the high wall and suddenly said, can you go up? Should we go over from here? Mu Shanji nodded. I'll try. That's what I was thinking. Looking at the high wall, Mu Shanji was a little uncertain, but that was all he could do. In the past year he hadn't done much rough work, and his body wasn't as flexible and durable as before. After exerting a great deal of strength he finally reached the top of the wall. However, when he saw the other side his scalp went numb. The other side was even higher than this side, and the ground was slightly sunken. If he were to jump down like this he would probably be injured. Shanji, what's wrong? Tang Jian saw that Mu Shanji had not jumped and was very anxious. She had already heard the sound of footsteps coming from afar. Hurry up and go over. Cousin, come over quickly. Han is most likely following her. Mu Shanji said, it's too high. It's half as high as here. There's only grass below. It's very desolate here. I don't know what's inside. Tang Jian was anxious. At this time Mu Shanji said, I see a small protruding stone. It's temporary. Chapter 5260. I'll stay on that small stone for a while. She should leave after playing for a while and come down later. Tang Jian watched Mu Shanji's figure disappear. He walked further away and stood on tiptoe. She could still see his hands grabbing the wall. She breathed a sigh of relief. The wall was so high that normal people would not look up and notice these details. Tangwa had already appeared in Tang Jian's line of sight. She had given Mu Shanji time to hide. Otherwise he would have already come to catch her. Miss Tang? When Han saw Tang Jian she was a little strange. Why are you here? Tang Jian said unhurriedly, I just lay down and felt a little stuffy so I decided to relax here. She rubbed her temples. I don't know what's wrong with me recently, but I've been feeling flustered. Maybe I'm a little uneasy. Honor understood, maybe you're a little uneasy because you're getting married. Why don't you call a doctor and prescribe some calming tea for you so that you can sleep better at night? Well, I'll try later. By the way, why are you here? Tang Jian changed the topic and tried to lead the two to the wall. This way they could not see the top of the wall. She was afraid that if they were far away from the wall, they would be in a lot of trouble if someone saw them. Miss Tang wanted to walk around and accidentally came to this place. She must have remembered that she and Miss Tang liked to play here when they were young, so she insisted on coming here to have a look. She also said that she wanted to play with bamboo shoot worms. Tang Jian saw Tang was staring at her master and felt relieved. It turned out that she was looking for bamboo shoot worms. She did remember that she used to catch bamboo shoot worms here with Tangwa when they were young. That was when she was very young. At that time she was also a carefree young lady. Because her father often ran between the two places and her mother occasionally followed him, she was sent here to take care of them. Speaking of this yard, it used to be where her father lived before he got married. Later, before she moved in, her uncle had renovated it. Thinking of this, Tang Jian felt a little guilty. But then she thought that she and Mu Shanji did not have a happy ending. After today she would not see him and would become someone else's wife. The guilt in her heart lessened a little. Tangwa didn't know what Tang Jian was thinking. She squatted beside the bamboo and carefully looked for bamboo worms. At this time, it was indeed the season for bamboo shoot worms. Soon she found one and reached out to grab it. When Han saw this, she was still a little worried that the bamboo shoot worm's sharp feet would hurt Tangwa. However, she didn't dare to stop it as she was afraid that Tangwa would be unhappy. Fortunately, Tangwa grabbed the right spot, and the thing she was worried about did not happen. Tangwa grabbed the bamboo shoot worm and went to Tang Jian. She handed it to Tang Jian. Tang Jian was stunned for a moment and did not take it. It wasn't that she had recalled anything. She didn't recall some of her childhood interests. Those were all for children to play with. His cousin wasn't a normal person, so it was normal for her to play these games. She had grown up and was no longer a child. In her opinion, these bugs were still a little ferocious, so she didn't want to catch them. There's only one. Cousin, you can play with it. Tang Jian's words were very beautiful. I'll watch you play. Hong Yang, go find 2 bamboo sticks and skewer the bamboo shoot worm for cousin. In a while the bamboo shoot worm will fly. Hong Yang quickly went to do it and soon found a bamboo stick. Tang Gua skewered the bamboo shoot worm and sure enough the bamboo shoot worm began to fly. Chapter 5261. The bamboo shoot worm buzzed as it flew, but no matter how hard it tried it couldn't get rid of the bamboo stick. She could only hold the bamboo stick and keep flying. Tang Jian looked at Tang Gua happily shaking the bamboo stick and felt a little envious. Although her cousin lost her mother when she was very young, she had a father who doted on her. Even if she was a fool she could live a good life. That was why she could be so carefree. She had to shoulder everything by herself. Although her uncle treated her well, he was different from her father. Tang Gua shook the bamboo shoot worm in her hand and unconsciously walked to the foot of the wall. Tang Jian didn't notice that she put one of her palms on the wall. Her lips curved slightly, and then a stream of internal energy came out of her palms and went directly to the small stone that Mu Shanji was standing on. Mu Shanji felt that something was wrong and then he grabbed the wall hard. As expected, the stone under his feet loosened and he fell down. The system gloated and reported to Tang Gua. Host, Mu Shanji is now holding onto the wall with both hands. It looks like he's having a hard time and he can't do anything else. He's probably having a hard time. Tang Gua said, I'll hide here for a while. How can I just catch one bamboo shoot worm? She knew what was next door. It was also the place of the minister's mansion. However, no one lived there. It used to be a dye house. Later, Minister Tang felt that it wasn't good to set up the dye house at home. It was inconvenient to do anything, so he moved the place. There weren't many people in the family. The place was locked and no one even went in to clean it. The yard was full of grass. Why was the bottom of the wall so deep? Because it was originally a pond, a place used to store paint. How could it not be deep? Mu Shanji really knew how to choose a place to hide. Mu Shanji was in pain. Fortunately, he was used to doing rough work. He reacted in time and grabbed the wall hard. If it was an ordinary person he would have fallen down. He really didn't expect that the stone would suddenly fall down. Thinking that this place was so desolate it seemed reasonable. He looked up at the place where he grabbed the stone. Seeing that it didn't loosen he was relieved. He was full of hope that Tang Gua would hurry up and leave. But Han'er's voice came from the other side of the wall. His face turned green. Tang Gua actually wanted to catch more bamboo shoot worms. Tang Jian didn't know about Mu Shanji's lightness, so she wasn't worried. In order to avoid being discovered, she didn't even look in that direction. Tang Gua played in this place for less than an hour. The system told her that Mu Shanji was tired and sweating, but he was still persevering. Your stamina is not bad. Tang Gua held 3 to 5 bamboo sticks in her left hand, which were full of flying bamboo shoot worms. She walked to the foot of the wall and gently pressed her palm against the wall. She circulated her internal force upward and suddenly loosened the place where Mu Shanji was holding. This time Mu Shanji didn't even have time to react. He fell straight down and let out a muffled groan. Because of the buzzing sound of the bamboo shoots in Tang Gua's hand, no one noticed what happened over there. Moreover, there was grass growing next door, so falling down definitely wouldn't cause a loud bang. The commotion would be much smaller. Let's go back. Tang Gua took the bamboo shoot worm and wobbled out of the small bamboo forest. Since the matter was done, she didn't want to stay here any longer. Tang Jian watched as Tang Gua left. She was also relieved. It was good to get along with a fool but also not good. It was easy to get rid of a fool but also not easy to get rid of. For example, now Mu Shanji didn't leave, but she couldn't chase him away. After all, this was not her home. She was just a temporary resident. Tang Jian thought of something and walked over to call Mu Shanji. Chapter 5262. Shanji, Sister Tang has left. You can come down. However, there was no movement from there. Tang Jian shouted again. This time she walked further away and looked at the wall. Only then did she realize that she couldn't see Mu Shanji's hand. She was anxious and quickly asked Hong Yang to get the ladder. After getting the ladder, Hong Yang climbed up and finally saw Mu Shanji, who had fallen into the pit. Mu Shanji's skin and flesh were relatively thick. He didn't faint from the fall, but his whole body was in a sorry state. He felt that his leg should be broken. Uncle, are you okay? Hong Yang asked anxiously. She turned back and said to Tang Jian, Miss, Uncle should be weak. Our ladder isn't long enough to reach him. I think we have to find a rope. And I'm afraid that Uncle can't get out of here. It won't be good if someone sees him. Hongyang, find me a rope. I'll go out from another place. Inform Guilu and tell him to prepare outside. If I'm not careful, people will be suspicious and implicate Jiyan. Mu Shanji endured the pain of his broken leg and was depressed. Tangwa didn't come earlier or later, but at this time, she was clearly going against him. Ever since he got married, everything went wrong because of Tangwa. It was impossible for him not to have some thoughts. Tang Jiyan could only be anxious on the ground. When she heard Hongyang say that Mu Shanji had already gone out with a rope, Qin Yang, who was guarding outside, also came in, and Guilu had already gone out to help. Her panicked heart calmed down. I'm afraid this fall is not light. I think it's right. If he didn't agree to be the son-in-law, this wouldn't have happened. Hongyang said angrily, if he had been with Miss earlier, these things wouldn't have happened. Now that they can't be together and can't let go, who will be unlucky if he isn't? If he had said something back then, Miss would have broken off the engagement with the Xie family. Tang Jiyan smiled bitterly. Yes, she had thought about it from the beginning. If Mu Shanji was willing, she could give up the marriage that was set since she was young. Even if people pointed at her, she would still be with Mu Shanji. Who would have thought that the end result would be like this? Not long after, Tangwa heard someone report that when Mu Shanji came back from outside, he accidentally fell and broke his leg. Someone had already gone to get a doctor, but they still didn't know the exact situation. As soon as Tangwa heard this, she pretended to be very anxious and hurriedly ran to see Mu Shanji. The original owner was obviously a fool, but when she heard that Mu Shanji was in trouble, she would always wake up a little. This was really strange. She was not in a hurry to see Mu Shanji's miserable state. When she arrived, Squire Tang was already there. He was frowning. Apparently he was also worried about Mu Shanji. He was still questioning Guilu about what had happened. Guilu had always been good at making up stories. When he spoke, it was as if he had been there. Minister Tang didn't think much about it. Don't worry, young master will be fine. Guilu consoled. He was a little afraid. His young master looked a little haggard. Tangwa also craned her neck to look inside, looking very anxious. The host was actually very obedient to Minister Tang. Squire Tang just said that Mu Shanji would be fine. Now that the doctor was bandaging his wound, she couldn't go in and disturb him. That would affect Mu Shanji. Of course, Tangwa wouldn't rush in. After a long time, the doctor came out with a head full of sweat. Tangwa quickly ran in. She really couldn't wait to see how miserable Mu Shanji was now. Chapter 52-63. Tangwa went in and saw Mu Shanji with one leg and one hand wrapped up tightly. His face was covered with large and small scratches. Brother Shanji, does it hurt? System. Mu Shanji looks like he's in a lot of pain. He promises that the host's conscience won't hurt. She was the culprit, but she still pretended to ask Mu Shanji if he was in pain. She was really going to die. It doesn't hurt. I'm fine. Don't worry. Mu Shanji's answer was perfunctory, but no one paid attention to it at this time because his miserable condition attracted everyone's attention. Squire Tang was already asking the doctor about Mu Shanji's condition. Son-in-law's right leg and left hand were broken, but they've been reattached. There are other wounds and bruises on his body. It's not a light fall. As the saying goes, it takes 100 days for bones and tendons to heal. He needs to rest well for the next few months. Don't move around so as not to affect the recovery of his bones. The doctor stroked his beard. As long as he recuperates well, it won't affect him in the future. It's all thanks to son-in-law's good health. If it were someone else, I'm afraid he'd be half dead. Mu Shanji heard this and felt a little relieved. Fortunately, there were still some weeds growing in the fallen area. If he fell on a smooth and flat ground, it would be more serious. It took 100 days for bones and tendons to heal. He wouldn't be able to do anything for the next few months. He was suddenly afraid that Tangwa would send him soup again. He decided to ask Guila later if he wanted to eat the food in the restaurant. His father-in-law would try his best to satisfy him. It's good that he can recover. I'll have to trouble you for the next few days. Squire Tang said politely and sent the doctor out. Tang Jian could come to see Mu Shanji openly after such a big matter. She was worried when she saw him in such a sorry state. But there were so many people here that she couldn't express her concern. She could only say a few words politely and let Mu Shanji recover well before leaving. I shouldn't have seen him. If I didn't see him, maybe he wouldn't have suffered today. Tang Jian said self-reproachfully when she returned to the room. It's all my fault. How can you blame Miss? If Miss Guo didn't come suddenly, this wouldn't have happened, Hong Yang said anxiously. Hong Yang said anxiously, isn't it because Miss Guo is being playful? If she wasn't playful, how could Tang's son-in-law fall down? Speaking of which, the young master is such a good person. Miss Guo will drag him down sooner or later. I really feel bad for him. Hong Yang continued and even pulled Qing Yang to agree. Although Qing Yang did not say anything, it could be seen from her expression that she also thought the same. I'm gnawing on the bookshelf. Tang Jian did not express her opinion, but in her heart she also felt that Tang Guo and Mu Shanji were not suitable for each other. It was not appropriate for her to say more. In fact, she was a little unwilling to accept it. It was because Tang Guo had a father who doted on her. Even if he was a fool, he could still marry Mu Shanji. She knew that Mu Shanji had married into her family largely because of her uncle's kindness to him. Why didn't she discover this earlier? If she did, Mu Shanji wouldn't owe her uncle a favor. Tang Jian couldn't visit Mu Shanji every day. Every few days she would find an excuse to go with Tang Guo to check on Mu Shanji's recovery. When they met, the two of them would not talk much. Seeing that there were only a few days left until the wedding day, Tang Jian had countless regrets in her heart. Suddenly she had a lot to say to Mu Shanji. But she couldn't stay any longer. In the end, she chose to send a letter to Mu Shanji. In the last few days, the two of them communicated through small notes. Chapter 52-64. Finally, it was the day of Tang Jian's wedding. Mu Shanji's health was much better. He couldn't walk for the sake of his health, but he could sit in a wooden wheelchair and be pushed around. On the morning of Tang Jian's wedding, he got up with the excuse of taking a breather. No one doubted that he had to attend such a big event. Tang Guo was right beside Mu Shanji. Everyone in the minister's mansion was waiting for the wedding procession. It didn't take long for the wedding procession to arrive. Even though young Master Xia was weak, he still came in person. After all, this was a marriage arranged by his parents. The woman had no intention of breaking off the engagement. It was impossible for him not to come on the day of the wedding. Compared to the other bridegrooms who came on horseback, he came in a carriage and was helped off the carriage. It could be seen from his pale face that he was very weak. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away. However, he was still very handsome, just that he was a little too thin for his face. Grabbing and grabbing. Even though he was wearing a red wedding dress, he didn't look very energetic. Only his eyes were exceptionally bright. They didn't look like the eyes of this body. In fact, with his physical condition, he wanted to break off the engagement. Even if he used his weak body as an excuse to break off the engagement, it would still affect the woman greatly. He was afraid that he would hurt her. If the other party took the initiative to break off the engagement, it wouldn't be a problem. However, the other party didn't seem to have that intention. His parents were very close to the other party's parents. Before his parents passed away, they told him to treat the girl of the family Tang well and not to bully her. In that case, if the other party didn't want to break off the engagement, then he would marry her. Anyway, he wouldn't live long. He would probably die in 2 years. At that time, his grandmother would make the decision to adopt a child from the clan under her name. She was very good at managing the business. It shouldn't be a problem for her to manage the Xia family's business. She could also let his grandmother enjoy her old age. It was better for her to take care of the parents' hard work than to be divided by the clan. Tang Jian's head was covered with a veil. She was helped out of the Tang family slowly. Squire Tang followed her out. His eyes were slightly red. After all, he had watched her grow up, so he was a little reluctant to part with her. Jian, if you feel wronged, you must ask someone to bring the news back. I will make the decision for you. No matter where you go, this is your home. Wonderful brush shop M.I.M. Tang Jian, thank you, uncle. She thought that Counselor Tang was just being polite, so she didn't take it to heart and answered politely. Squire Tang was used to her being like this since she was young, so he didn't think much of it. After all, men and women were different. Even if Tang Jian was his niece, he couldn't get too close to her out of courtesy. Naturally, there were many things that he couldn't say. He could only ask the old maid to take care of Tang Jian. Tang Guo and Mu Shanji walked out. Mu Shanji's gaze fell on Tang Jian's back. His eyes were filled with reluctance, sadness, and helplessness. He regretted not having the courage back then. If he had the courage, Jian would not have married someone else. His gaze then fell on the young man in the red wedding dress. He was about the same age as him, but he was very thin and weak. He looked like a sickly person. Would Jian be happy in the future if she were to marry such a sickly man? If she went to the Xia family, would she be bullied? If this sickly man didn't live long, wouldn't Jian be a widow? The more Mu Shanji thought about it, the more regretful he felt. He couldn't wait to rush over and pull Tang Jian back. Fortunately, his leg and arm were broken now. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how to control himself. Chapter 5265. Tang Guo looked at everything in front of her with a smile and cheered with everyone else. However, she caught a glimpse of Mu Shanji's pain and restraint. She almost couldn't help but roll her eyes. At this time, her eyes fell on Xie Rong. Xie Rong made a gesture of invitation, and Tang Jian was helped into the carriage that was arranged like a bridal sedan. After all, the journey was so long and it was more stable to take a carriage. Sitting in a sedan chair was not comfortable and it was very bumpy. It was also very tiring and they had to walk a very long distance. The bride had already been sent into the carriage. Xie Rong stepped forward to greet Minister Tang and said a few words. To seize and see Squire Tang expressed his gratitude this time. He hoped that Tang Jian could live well and that she would not be bullied in the Xie family. Xie Rong's reply was extremely brief. No. The reason he was able to come today was because the doctor had prescribed a few strong doses of medicine. After the wedding, he estimated that he would have to rest in bed for half a month. Unfortunately, he could not break off the engagement. Forget it, he might as well stay in the Xie family and let her live a carefree life. Before he got married, he had asked someone to inquire about Tang Jian. She didn't seem to be someone who would be entangled in love. Instead, she was shrewd and efficient in managing the business. She shouldn't be the kind of woman who would stay at home peacefully. Yunxian Pavilion. As the saying goes, where there are gains there are losses. When he was gone, as long as she treated his grandmother well, so what if the Xie family's assets were all hers? She couldn't bring it with her when she was born and couldn't bring it with her when she died. Seeing Xie Rong's sincerity, Minister Tang finally let him go. When Xie Rong turned around, he suddenly felt a gaze on him. He subconsciously turned around and saw Tang Guo looking at him. He didn't know why, but the moment he saw Tang Guo, he felt slightly uncomfortable. He didn't want to go through the formalities of getting married. He quickened his pace and was helped into the carriage. When he finally sat down, he let out a long sigh and pressed his hand to his chest. Seeing this, the manservant who served him became worried. Is young master not feeling well? The servant's eyes turned red. The doctor has already said that young master's body cannot be tormented. Look, he can't take it anymore. Xie Rong picked up the folding fan beside him and knocked it on the manservant's head. Today is a joyous day, so don't speak nonsense. My parents have told me to give the family Tang girl some face. If I didn't come here personally today, how would others see her in the future? In the future, when I'm gone, she won't be able to establish herself in the Xie family. I'm afraid that the people from the Xie family will join forces to bully her. At that time, my parents' property will probably be swallowed up by them. Grandma is old and I don't want her to worry and tire herself out. Everyone in the clan is so mean, I'm afraid she'll die from anger. Miss Tang is very good at taking care of these things. Today I have given them enough face so that the people of the clan will not dare to look down on me. In the future, even if I am not around, no one will be able to take advantage of me. If his body was in good condition, he might be able to think of a way to stop this marriage. If he really had to think of a way, he could think of 100 ways. However, his body wasn't in good condition, and he didn't have the time or energy to do that, so he might as well just leave it at that. Even if he were to hand over the Xie family's property to an outsider, he was not willing to let the people from the main family take advantage of him. Young master, are you really all right? Don't scare me. It's fine, you'd better be quiet. If you continue to make noise, I can't guarantee that there won't be any problems with my body. Xie Rong's words really made the manservant shut up. He was afraid that if he were to disturb Xie Rong, something would really happen to him. If that happened, this wedding would become a tragedy. Chapter 5266. I thought you were sick when you clutched your chest. Four Seasons said worriedly, it's good that you're fine. What happened to you just now? Nothing, I'll rest for a while. Xie Rong closed his eyes. Four Seasons didn't say anything else. Looking at Xie Rong's pale skin, he was really worried that he wouldn't be able to serve by his side one day. Xie Rong didn't actually fall asleep. His mind was replaying the strange scene just now. It was his first time seeing it, but he couldn't ignore it. Who's the young woman standing next to Minister Tang? And who was the man sitting in the wooden wheelchair? Did you forget? That woman is Minister Tang's only daughter, Tang Guo. Because she stayed in her mother's womb for too long, she's a bit dumb. That man is Minister Tang's son-in-law. I heard that he accidentally fell a while ago. It's quite serious, breaking his leg and arm. He'll need a few months to recover. I've told you about this before. I didn't pay much attention to this. I don't like to care about other people's family matters. For Season said, then you're asking about it today. Since I've seen him, I naturally have to ask. We're already in-laws, so there'll be a lot of interactions in the future. However, why would he feel regret in his heart? Luckily, he was a short-lived ghost. The doctor said he only had a few years left, so he didn't need to worry about these things. This time, Xie really didn't want to think about it. He emptied his mind and closed his eyes to rest. The wedding procession slowly set off from Wuxin County, heading towards Qingfeng County. Along the way, the procession was very lively. There were also many onlookers along the streets. Tang Jian heard Hong Yang's reminder that they had already left Wuxin County. Her lively heart finally calmed down. That illusory dream was still a dream. It was shattered. But when she thought about spending the rest of her life with someone else, she felt terrible. She heard Hong Yang whisper to her that young Master Xie's body wasn't very good. Tang Jian thought that if he was really bad, he wouldn't have come to fetch the bride. She hoped that his body wasn't very good. That way they might not even have the wedding night. A person with a weak body shouldn't be able to do that, right? The carriage traveled slowly, and it took nearly half a day to reach the Xie family's gate in Qingfeng County. Next was a series of procedures such as the wedding ceremony. Old Madame Xie smiled, but she was still a little worried when she saw Xie Rong. She was even more worried. In fact, she had already accepted her fate. She knew that her grandson did not have many years left to live, so she would cooperate with whatever he wanted to do. The heavens were too unfair to her Xie family. They had clearly done nothing wrong, but people kept disappearing one after another. Seeing that her only grandson didn't have many years left to live, she wondered if she had sinned in her previous life to receive such a punishment in this life. "Grandma," Xie Rong called out. He realized that the other party was distracted. She was most likely thinking about something unhappy. "It's good that you're married. I hope this marriage will make your body better." Xie Rong shook his head and held old Madame Xie's hand. He whispered, "Grandma, this is fate. Even the doctors can't cure it. How can you expect a wedding to change it?" Old Madame Xie immediately understood what Xie Rong meant. She sighed, "Today is your big day. Don't mention those unhappy things. Don't worry, I won't blame the family Tang girl. I'm not old and muddle-headed. Your body isn't good. She'll be at a disadvantage if she marries you." Chapter 5267. "Miss, what are you doing?" Qing Yang and Hong Yang chased the others out of the room and asked them to wait outside. They felt that it was better to be strong so that their miss would not be bullied. The Xie family was considered a big family. Although they started at the same level because of the accident of the master, the development of the family was lagging behind the Xie family. Only when their miss was strong, the Xie family would not look down on her. They, as dowry maids, had to protect their miss at all times. The reason why Hong Yang suddenly asked was that Tang Jian had drugged the wine. Her face was full of shock. Did her miss want to poison the young master of the Xie family on the wedding night? At this time she was a little confused. Even if her miss did not like the young master of the Xie family, there was no need to poison him. Tang Jian shook the wine pot and looked at the two shocked and hesitant faces. She shook her head. "You misunderstood. I didn't want to poison him. This drug can only make him more unconscious." She had prepared this drug in advance for the wedding night. On the second day she would find other excuses. If she found more excuses like this, the other party would not be interested. Anyway, she did not rely on the Xie family to live. If the other party was sensible, he would not have such thoughts again and they could live in peace. She did not stop him from taking concubines. As long as they did not disturb her, he could take as many concubines as he wanted. "Qing Yang, I see. I was almost scared to death just now. Since Miss still can't forget the young master, why didn't you break off the engagement?" Hong Yang did not understand. "I don't think the Xie family is harsh. If Miss breaks off the engagement, the other party can't force you to marry. I can't forget him. If I break off the engagement, can I be with him?" Tang Jian said, "Or will we meet secretly like before and finally take that step one day? Since there is no future, it is better to stay far away. Out of sight, out of mind, you can live a peaceful life. After a long time, some memories will gradually fade, and you will not be as troubled as now." It was not that she could not break off the engagement, but she did not think it was necessary. Mu Shanji did not become the son-in-law. She had an idea to break off the engagement. Why bother now? Now that they were married, it was much easier for her to reject someone she did not like than to reject Mu Shanji. Presumably, a normal man would not have any other thoughts after being rejected by her 2 or 3 times. She had never thought about anything in the Xie family. As long as she was not disturbed, she would be fine. She had found a place where she could die of old age. Fortunately, there are still the 2 of you. In the future, you will have to pay more attention to the businesses in Wuxin County. Go and take a look often. Miss, aren't you going over? Tiredness appeared on Tang Jian's face. Don't go if you can. Don't worry too much. The 3 of them chatted for a while before someone announced that Xie Rong had arrived. Tang Jian was prepared for this and did not panic at all. What she didn't know was that Xie Rong had prepared for this. He had hidden some powder under his fingernails. It wasn't for Tang Jian but for himself. He would become very weak in a moment, and Tang Jian would understand that he was a man who didn't have long to live. But he never thought that things would be different from what he had expected. Xie Rong entered the room and went through the formalities. He lifted the red veil and poured 2 glasses of wine. Then he raised his glass and toasted with Tang Jian. Tang Jian picked up the glass and used her sleeve to cover her mouth. In fact, she was pouring the wine into her clothes and then put the glass down. Xie Rong, on the other hand, dipped his fingernail into the wine and drank it. The peak. Chapter 5268. When he came, he had already told 4 Seasons to come in and pick him up as soon as he heard the noise. Grab and seize. However, after he drank the wine, he felt dizzy and then sat down with the help of a stool. He thought to himself that he had used a strong medicine to welcome the bride. Did it cause a lot of damage to his body? It was just a medicine that made his body weak, but he was about to faint. Just as he thought about it, Xie Rong fainted. Tang Jian sighed in relief and said to Qin Yang and Hong Yang, "Put a quilt on the floor and put him there." At this time, Tang Jian didn't notice that Xie Rong's face was very pale. Qin Yang and Hong Yang felt something was wrong and quickly told Tang Jian. Not only that, Xie Rong's hands were cold and his forehead was sweating. They were afraid. Tang Jian didn't expect it to be like this. Now she didn't dare to delay and quickly called people in. 4 Seasons had been waiting outside. When he heard the noise, he quickly came in. Seeing Xie Rong unconscious, he was scared out of his wits. The young master was too cruel to himself. He couldn't bear it. He quickly helped him to the bed and shouted for the people outside to call the doctor. "Young madam, the young master's body has always been weak. He must be too tired today. Please forgive him." Tang Jian heard 4 Seasons' words and her heartbeat gradually calmed down. 4 Seasons didn't seem to suspect anything. Was it because Xie Rong's body had always been weak? It was because of the strange books. In this case, nothing would happen between them in the future. At this time, she wasn't worried about Xie Rong. Instead, she was relaxed. Wasn't this exactly what she wanted? 3 doctors came in with big medicine boxes. Except for 4 Seasons, the others were driven out of the room. Tang Jian saw that she had nothing to do and was very cooperative. Her understanding appearance made the Xie family have a good impression of her. They felt that they had married the right young madam. When the doctors were diagnosing, 4 Seasons whispered, "The young master took some medicine himself." The doctors were Xie Rong's confidants. When they heard that, they knew that the young master was messing around again. With 4 Seasons, it was not strange that the doctors diagnosed that Xie Rong took medicine. They even took the initiative to hide it and operated on Xie Rong. Fortunately, they came in time and Xie Rong was fine. The main thing was that he used too much medicine 2 days ago. It hurt his vitality. He had to stay in bed for a month. His body was weaker than before. 4 Seasons felt terrible. Xie Rong was sent back to his room in the middle of the night. 4 Seasons explained the situation to Tang Jian. After Tang Jian heard about it, she pretended that she was fine and told Xie Rong to recuperate. "Young miss, this is great. Young master Xie can't do that at all. Young miss, you don't need to avoid him in the future." Hong Yang could not help but feel happy. Previously, I felt that this young master Xie's complexion did not look like a normal person. So it turns out that he was weak and sickly since young, and could only stay in the house to recuperate. The 2 who knew Tang Jian's thoughts were glad. This way their young madam didn't have to deal with too much. If Xie Rong was gone in the future, their young madam would be more relaxed. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.